4. What to do instead. Now keeping the Sabbath holy was a commandment in the Old Testament times. However, whenever we look into the New Testament times, there is no longer a commandment that is required of us. All this means is that the Sabbath day is no longer a day that is specifically dedicated towards God the way it was under the old law, with no unnecessary work being done on that day. The closest thing that we can find to this commandment is how we are supposed to be gathering together on the first day of the week. This is to honor God and to remember the sacrifice that Jesus gave by dying on the cross and rising from the grave on the first day of the week. Now this is not a, quote, modern day Sabbath. Instead, it is just a new focus required under the New Testament, something that is different from this Sabbath commandment. We aren't commanded to abstain from work on the Lord's Day. Instead, we have a somewhat similar purpose and meaning behind gathering together on this first day of the week. Acts chapter 20, verse 7, in which it says, "And upon the first day of the week, when the disciples came together to break bread, Paul preached unto them, ready to depart on the morrow, and continued his speech until midnight." Through this verse we can see some differences between the Sabbath and this commandment of gathering on the first day of the week. On this first day of the week, we are told our activities are still something primarily religious based. However, through it, we can see that it talks about how we need to be gathering together on this day so that we can break bread. This is a reference to the Lord's Supper that Jesus instituted with his disciples so that they would remember him until his return, a commandment that we also must follow. In 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 24, "And when he had given thanks, he brake it and said, Take, eat, this is my body, which is broken for you. This do in remembrance of me." In this verse we can see the proof that whenever we gather to break bread, it is done so that we can remember the symbolism behind the sacrifice that Jesus gave through his death on the cross. We still have an important day and an event in which we are to be making sure that we are setting something aside that will be different than any other day of the week. By this alone, we will be able to make sure that we are praising God, in which it will allow us to make sure that we are setting time aside so that we will use it to honor and to praise God. In John chapter 5, verses 16 through 17, it says, "And therefore did the Jews persecute Jesus, and sought to slay him, because he had done these things on the Sabbath day. But Jesus answered them, My Father worketh hereunto, and I work." Whenever it comes to the New Testament, it doesn't really matter whatever day it might be, as we are able to see from this verse that his Father works, so Jesus works too. There isn't a specific day that we are prohibited from working. However, if there was any day that we are going to say was more important or special from the religious standpoint, that day would be Sunday, the first day of the week. This is the day that is the one that we are required to be gathering together as Christians, not only to worship, but then also to do those things that are required on the first day of the week, like participating in the communion, if in fact we are a Christian and we have been baptized. This fact alone should make this Sunday, the first day of the week, different than any other day of the week, which gives us the proof that we can see that this Sabbath idea and commandment is something that is no longer something that we are supposed to be following. Instead, there is no day that we are commanded to not work on. The most special day that we have is Sunday, as this first day of the week. However, this is not by any means a kind of new Sabbath day. This idea of the Sabbath is something that is no longer commanded that we are supposed to be doing.